People forget how people pay the rent, how people pay the mortgage, that it's the economy, it's whether they have a job. People forget. But in a recession, they really start to remember. The worst housing market in years is upon us right now. So right now, guys, the housing market is in the weirdest place. It is in a place of utter denial. It's in a place where people are literally just following their emotions. And now couldn't be a better time to walk through that with you whilst I'm on this beautiful walk in the middle of nowhere. The interesting thing about what's going on right now is lots of realtors will tell you the housing market is a product of the immigration policies that you see, and I would agree that that is kind of the case, and that's definitely having the impact, but that is not the sole reason by any stretch of the imagination. And what people are trying to do when they talk about that is they're essentially just trying to rationalize the bubble. They're essentially just trying to say it's okay, you know, prices are always going to go up because of this and you don't have to worry. The thing is, guys, I hate to tell you this, but this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. You only have to travel around, look at other markets to realize that it's not immigration. Is the reason the housing market went up this year in 2023 in the United States, is that because of immigration to the United States? That's an entirely separate country. To say that it's immigration is just laughable. And it's simple questions like that. You can blow holes in that entire argument. So if it's not that, then what is it? What is causing the housing market to go up here in 2023? And it's quite obvious. When a bubble bursts, you have a cycle that plays out. In fact, even when the bubble's rising, you have a cycle that plays out. Last year, we've talked about it. It was the denial phase. Everybody was in denial about what was happening. To a certain extent, that's still going on right now. But now it's the return to normal. Everything's going back to normal because of immigration. It doesn't matter whether that's true or not. That's what they're telling you to believe. But the reality is, it's not that at all. The housing market is in a bubble. It is not grounded to any fundamentals. When you look at incomes, it makes zero sense. You can't make sense of the housing market in Canada when you look at incomes. And it's normal people that are buying these houses. So there's big problems there because you're like, how are the lenders lending to these people if they can't afford it, if they're never going to pay it back? And the reality is, it's because of mortgage insurance and other things, and also fraud. These are the things that you have during a bubble. And it's stories like the immigration story that push the bubble even further because people then rationalize it. They're like, this can't backfire on me. This is a win-win situation. I would be stupid to not commit fraud and buy a house because in a year, of course, it's going to be worth more because Canada is bringing in more people. People forget how people pay the rent, how people pay the mortgage, that it's the economy, it's whether they have a job. People forget. But in a recession, they really start to remember. And I believe we're already in a recession. I mean, we've already got personal savings that have collapsed. Remember all the pandemic savings that we saw last year? Everybody was going on vacation. Everybody was buying this and that. That has all gone. And that was just a small fraction of the people that even had those savings. The reality is most people didn't have that. And then they're running up the credit card. So everybody's out there right now and they're using the credit card. So if they're using the credit card, that isn't good for the economy either, is it? Because you've only got to put two and two together to realize that we're coming into a debt crisis. And you see, this is what I think the yield curve is trying to tell us, guys. This is what I think the yield curve is saying to us. It's saying that, hey, you're going to have a massive debt crisis. And the debt crisis is coming because it's not just mortgage debt. You have credit card debt, you have student loan debt, you have auto debt. All these bubbles that have been blown since 2008. I mean, before 2008, people weren't financing their cars as much as they are today. And why are they financing their cars as much as they are today? It's because they can't afford them. People are buying things and they're buying everything that they cannot afford. And they've been living on borrowed time since 2008. Now, the only reason that Canada didn't feel the full force of 2008, and it did in some areas, and some people, even on on this channel have felt the full force of 2008, but it wasn't as broad, it wasn't as wide as it was in places like the United States. So why? Why was that? It's because the debt levels were less. Canada hadn't seen the massive run-up that the US had saw in real estate. Had prices risen? Yes, but they hadn't risen to the extent they had in the US. There was bad lending practices going on. It wasn't near the size of the US bubble when you compare it side by side. But now Canada is even bigger than the US bubble. So Canada's real estate bubble is now bigger than the US real estate bubble. And to people who think this can just carry on, it tires me. It really fucking tires me, because it's so obvious to a lot of us that that can't be the case. How can it be the case? Unless people's incomes are growing, you eventually get to a point where either the economy breaks and then essentially people start losing jobs and then they start defaulting. They have no other choice anymore. The banks, they can work with people for as long as they can until people start losing their jobs, and then what can they do? They can't just sit there and say, yeah, you know what, it's okay, just don't pay your mortgage, we're not going to foreclose on you. They have to eventually. But don't get me wrong, I get it. They don't want to foreclose on you. They don't want to have that on their books. They don't want to go through with that process. So they're going to work with you. The US banks did the exact same thing. We're going through the same thing. And when you look at the housing market and you say, this is crazy, I don't understand it, and you look at the rental market and you see the same thing going on, you just have to realize, guys, that these markets are emotions and you're seeing the emotions play out. That's why they're not rational. We're not rational as human beings when we're emotional. Most people make financial decisions based on their emotions, and that is why they mostly lose money. That is why they end up in such bad situations. I mean, I feel so sorry for anybody out in the housing market right now that is trying to buy a house. I mean, I think the probability of the people buying right now getting foreclosed on is really high. I mean, don't you think that? Because it seems obvious to me. With that happening, those people are probably making decisions not because it's a great time to buy right now and their finances are all in order. It's because they're in denial about the economy and they're saying, we need to buy a house. They're making these emotional reasons for buying. We need to start a family now. We can't wait. Whatever it is, we need a backyard for the dog. We can't find a rental. Whatever it is, it's an emotional reason. Back in 2008, when people got into issues back then, they were more likely to lower their living standards in order to survive, in order to save as much money as possible. So they would live a really frugal lifestyle. But now people don't do that, especially the younger generations. They just cannot do that at all. So they're just living on the credit card even more so than people were back in 2008. And there's this zero responsibility, which essentially the government teaches, that there is no responsibility. Just blame it on everybody else. Just blame your problems on everybody else. But the trouble is, when you do that, you never learn from your mistakes. And that is why society is as fucked it is right now, is because nobody learns from their mistakes. And likewise, if people are corrupt, they don't get punished for it. We're told we have a democracy when we actually do not. It's clear that we don't. You can go and vote, but who are you voting for? You have two choices, really. In a true democracy, it's a level playing field and it's fair for all parties who are competing in the election. It's far from that here in Canada. You've got large corporate donors that are donating to both parties, and the same thing happens in the United States, the same thing happens in the UK. This happens all across Western democracies. So it's not really democracy, is it? But that's the society that we live in, guys. When you look at this housing market, like I said, look at it as a market of emotion. So right now, the people are buying at high prices with high interest rates. You just have to feel sorry for them and realize this right now. A load of people are hurting. A load of people are essentially going through with their banks, trying to work things out. The reality is it's not going to work, because unless you think that things are going to get better from now on going forward, how is it going to work? Tell me. Let me know in the comments. It's just not. Things are going to get way worse. And I think the reason the yield curve is predicting that this is going to be a depression is because it's everything now. It's not just mortgages like it was in 2008. It is everything. It's auto loans, student debt, credit card debt, business debt, whatever it is just everywhere. So the amount of money that that is needed to bail this thing out. It's too much. It's impossible without causing 20-30% inflation. And that is not what the yield curve is predicting, at least right now. If you've enjoyed this, let me know in the comments if you like these walk and talks in these random middle of nowhere areas in the Rocky Mountains. Let me know. Thought it was just a little bit of a time for a change. So if you've enjoyed this video, you might like that video there. You might also like that video there. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.